Hi there, it's Jill. Every month we run free movement coaching calls for anyone. We've got existing coaches who have done our level one before, we've got personal trainers who are thinking about joining our community, or this is just for you if you want to get moving more and get your friends and family out and moving more. This month's focus was on adventure runs or walks, and these are really fun. You can do them absolutely anywhere. If you've got a street near you, a park, really anywhere, or your garden, it's all about helping you to find opportunities for creative movement wherever you go, thinking about what you're capable of, and maybe just pushing those kind of that zone of comfort a little bit further every time. So we started these a few years ago rather, when we were looking at how we could get our community out and interacting more playfully with the environment. We generally tend to run these in twos. We separate people into twos, so they're very chatty, but they also just give you time to navigate obstacles together and kind of build your confidence as you go. We run these with older populations. Generally, that's more of a walk and just looking at different obstacles that we come up across and thinking about how we can creatively navigate them. But we also run them with people in their 30s, 40s, or 50s, and that tends to be more running and a little bit of a faster pace. But normally we will couple people with partners who are at the same kind of level, who either want to go very fast or just want to go very slow and have a nice time and have a nice chat. Ultimately, it doesn't really matter what your aim is, but we want to get everyone out and interacting with their environment in their local communities. So this is how we do it. We had time at the end for question and answers, but if you weren't there on the call and you've got Q&A, you've got questions, please do send us your questions and we will try our best to answer them.
Record. So what we realize in retrospect is a lot of our, when we first started, a lot of our activities just sort of looked like gym activities, except we were doing them outside, which is sort of natural if somebody has a background in working in a gym or doing CrossFit or whatever. Sometimes they just think, well, it's just a bigger gym, and you don't realize that a lot of your ideas and how you can run activities are really constrained. So Jill and I were talking one summer, like, it's so beautiful. It'd be just really nice to give people an opportunity to explore the area and to move around and get to know the environment outside of the context of just moving kettlebells or flipping tires or crawling or running and jumping in a sort of constrained area. So we started doing these adventure runs, which was just an opportunity for our members and for us to go out and explore and see what we saw out in nature. So they're a way for the community to interact with nature, to engage in physical activity, and also to solve movement problems. So this idea of solving movement problems is one of the things we've really been pushing for the last few years. And it's one of the definitions of parkour, except obviously we're not jumping over buildings or anything. We're just encountering the environment and seeing what opportunities it affords us to interact with the environment and what interesting things can come out of it. And I think they're really important because it's a way to move in nature besides just running and walking. So a lot of people, when they get outside, they're like, oh, I really want to do some physical activity outside. They get there and they think, okay, I can walk, I can run. Now what? And that's sort of the question that we're trying to answer is what else can you do and how can you think about using the environment? Um, so my first question is why adventure runs and nature walks? And that's going to depend on you and who you're working with. And what I mean is we have specific reasons why we will do adventure runs based on our population and based on the people we're working with. But it's really important that you want to think about, well, who am I working with and what are their needs? So questions I ask people to think about is, who are you working with? Who's your community and your population? Are they older? Are they younger? Do they have any limitations? What are your goals for these? So are you just focusing on physical training and getting people stronger, faster, better at running and jumping over things? Or is it also important? Do you want to think about social aspects, emotional aspects, overall wellness, really focus on the benefits of being out in nature that I think we all know about? Then you want to think about your environment and your place. Where are you going to do this? Where could you do this? And then also think about any limiting factors and barriers, and we can talk about that a little bit later. So think about environmental factors or other things that might restrain your options. So what I'd like for everyone to do now, and I need to go ahead and find the chat somewhere, but I'm going to find the chat and I want you to look over these questions and I want you to answer for yourself. So first one is, why do you want to provide adventure runs and walks? What are some of your goals? So think about that for a second and let's see if I can find the chat. Okay, let's see what we got here. I'm in the chat.
Okay. Do you want us to go on and answer these questions now, Andrew?
Yeah, sorry. Yes, please. So just the first one I'd like to see. Actually, if we have 7 participants, we could probably do it verbally as well. Yeah, so Jill said something that's true is we are going to start organizing some older population walks around where we are up in Scotland. So that's one of the things that we're focusing on because we already have quite an active older populations group, and a lot of them have expressed interest in walking around. So that's one of the things we're going to do. Ooh, good answer from Beth. Let's see. Outdoor charity, work with groups of young people who I think will engage well in this. We do nature walks. Um, I'd also like to add more adventure. Also work with groups of women from underrepresented backgrounds and refugee asylum seekers who I also think would love this. So yeah, there's lots of opportunities, and for the adventure walks are quite nice because they end up being very empowering because people get to actually engage with the environment and see what they're capable of doing. Andy said explore fun social ways to move and engage with each other in the environment. Good. All right. I think that's a good start. Yeah, so already in the answers we've had, people have expressed importance in the social aspect of that, and I think that's really big. One of the good things about the adventure walks is based on how you structure them, you can sort of elicit different benefits. And one of the things we'll often do when we do our adventure runs or adventure walks is we'll pair people off in groups of twos or threes. So you can obviously do everything together, but there's something very nice about finding a few people who you think might be supportive or might have a nice chat and send them off with each other. And they end up doing quite a lot of chatting, quite a lot of talking. And then they also come up with interesting solutions at a pace and an intensity that's appropriate for them. Let's see what else. So Emma says to get people started on a running journey to help build confidence. Very good. With people, I haven't tried it before. I'd like to build some strength exercise into using logs and rocks. Yeah, so that's a good example of using the environment. And the adventure runs are quite nice because even if you don't think of yourself as a runner, it's much easier to get people, if it's appropriate for them, to jog 100 meters, 200 meters here and there than to have them go ahead and do, a 2K run right off the bat. Rachel says she works with women over 50 who don't like going to the gym. Yeah, that's a really big cohort and are looking to build confidence in playing, building strength outside. Perfect. Okay. Um, so I've already talked about this a little bit. So I'm going back to the questions now. Who would you be doing this with? So I have an idea of the populations. So no one mentioned specifically special populations in terms of working with people with movement disabilities, but that's one of the things you want to consider as well. Next question is what environment do you have access to? Because not everyone is going to have access to miles and miles of verdant green space. The good thing about adventure walks is they can also work in urban areas. If you think about it, that's how parkour started. So parkour, which came out of urban France on the outskirts of Paris, was essentially just, working class kids who didn't have access to sports equipment and were just running around their city trying to find ways to play. So there's certainly no rules against doing it in an urban area, but obviously if you have access to some green space, that's going to be really nice. It's one of the things we really push if possible, having access to a space that feels like your own, that feels like you have the right and you feel comfortable moving around in, will really let people be a bit more creative with how they engage with the environment. I want to think about individual barriers now. So in the chat, the last bullet point I have in the chat is what are some individual barriers, maybe physical, emotional, mental. When I say structural, that could be like access to transportation and things like that. And that's all the individual level, so that your individual members, but it's also worth thinking about what are some of the community-wide barriers or limitations, because you want to think about this as well when you plan your adventure runs. You want to be honest about what the barriers and limitations are and how you can overcome them. So I'm going to open it up to the chat. I want to see what people get from there. Oh, Rachel and Beth know each other. And I think, oh, Hilly can be quite good depending on what you want to do. Hilly can be an asset. Jill, I wonder if we could if we could probably take people off mute if people wanted to have a chat for a second.
Sure, I'm just trying to let in a bunch of people who are struggling to find the link.
I didn't realize there were
Hang
people
on.
who were trying to come in. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me see.
I think we can just unmute ourselves. So I think if people want to speak,
Yeah, yeah. I think it. Oh, hi, Beth. I think
Hiya.
I tried to keep it open because at first I had the settings really restrictive, but then I was thinking, well, actually, if we have 7 people, that's quite manageable. Um, so yeah, Beth, just thinking about barriers. Is there anything that jumped out at you?
I think something I get a lot. I work with lots of group where there's quite a lot of cultural barriers. It's like stuff
Mm,
that they haven't done before, or doing it is seen as being something that they can't do, or but actually, I find that people doing it as a group together with other folks from that community really helps. And I've seen some amazing, like some of the work we've done, we've seen groups going on to do loads more stuff as a result of just being given opportunity. But I also think people don't always feel comfortable, do they, in like park spaces. I do a lot of work with LGBTQ plus young people,
yeah.
and I find they don't feel very comfortable in park spaces. So then I suppose I like this idea of that, I like being able to bring it to where they're at and where they do feel comfortable, because it's a big barrier to getting outdoors is not feeling welcome there. And I think that's across lots of different groups of people, isn't it? So having
Yeah,
the city element is really great. Yeah.
absolutely. That's one of the things is I think in the UK especially, there's still this perception that going out into nature is a sort of middle class endeavor, and you understand why, because there are barriers, whether it's gear, access to transportation, or just not feeling welcome. And that's, as you said, that's one of the advantages in doing it in a group. When you do it in a group, it can really help people with their sense of confidence. Um, and in terms of what people think they're capable of, I think that's a really important point that I want to bring up later, because a lot of this is going to be dealing with narratives that people have about themselves and their confidence. And we use this phrase all the time, allowing people to give themselves permission um, to actually move, or give themselves permission to engage with the environment. Because a lot of times people will hold themselves back for whatever reason. That was good. Well, any other barriers that jumped out at people that people think about? There's going to be some physical barriers that we can talk about later as well, and how we can overcome the physical barriers. But I think a lot of times it is going to be the emotional or sort of social barriers about people feeling welcome, people feeling comfortable, people feeling that they have the right to do it. So it is, yeah, finding an environment that works for people is going to be important. Okay. So I want to get into actually talking about movement. So what movements do people do in a gym? So I found this very nice sterile CGI uh, list of equipment there. And I want you to think about, and I'll just I'll open this up to unmuting. Okay. When you go to a gym, what are some activities that you think about? What are some movements that are elicited by being in the gym?
There's a lot of equipment and machines that focus mostly working in a sagittal plane. It's quite sort of restrictive in terms of, there's not that many machines that encourage lateral movement or rotation, especially the cardio
Yeah.
machines.
Yeah, that's a really good answer. You said two good points there. A lot of times, obviously because of the picture I provide as well, people think about the gym, about going and using machines, quite kind of isolated movements, sometimes abstract movements as well. It's like, well, if I use this special machine, it's going to make this muscle stronger, but there's not a lot of emphasis on building up capabilities. And then, as you said, Emma, as well, obviously, a lot of times it's going to be focusing on one or two planes. So we think of, treadmills, rowing machines, a lot of cardio stuff that's just going to be moving in a straight line, which is sort of unnatural when you're out and walking. Even if you're just walking down a city road, you're dodging cracks, you're dodging people, you're jumping over puddles, all these sort of opportunities to use your body in the environment that just naturally won't show up when you're in a gym environment. Um, and obviously, when you're using machines, it's very easy to sort of get into this reductionist mindset of that your body is only a series of joints and only a series of muscles. We never actually think, well, what is that good for? What can we actually use our body for? So if you're in the gym, a lot of times people are going to have some kind of model like this. There's nothing this I think is quite a good model. But essentially, one's job as a personal trainer is often to just cut the body down into individual pieces. So thinking, okay, well, we're going to do some vertical pushes, so with triceps and deltoids, whatever, vertical pulls, lats, biceps, horizontal push, horizontal pull. Don't worry, you don't need to memorize this. Just giving you an idea of how people might break the body down to these sort of constituent parts and just thinking about the movement rather than thinking about the task or what it is you can do. So what I find sometimes is working with personal trainers, they get outside in these adventure runs and they think, okay, well, we can stop and do some press ups here, or here we can stop and do some squats, so now we can get a little bit of quadricep or we can get a little bit of chest. But what I'm positing in this is that when you're doing these adventure runs, it's really most beneficial to get away from this way of thinking. You really want to think about how can I naturally use the environment to perform tasks. So tasks being solving a problem as opposed to just arbitrarily saying stop here and do 20 press ups, stop here and do 20 squats. Because people have plenty of opportunities to do that. It's generally not very fun if you don't think of yourself as a gym person, then people associate the idea of stopping and doing 20 press ups with doing something bad in school or PE. Often that's a punishment. So we want to make sure we don't fall into that trap. So my other question now is how can we engage with our environment besides walking? So I'd like for you to look at this picture, and then anyone who's feeling brave, or if you want to put into a chat, we just want to think about, well, what are some opportunities that if you're outside, all of a sudden, we're not thinking about, oh, well, I can use my triceps here and I can use my hamstrings there. What do you see when you see this picture? What are you thinking about in terms of opportunities for movement?
Balance, climbing, jumping, swimming.
Yeah, exactly right. So you can balance over the rocks. I mean, if one really wanted to, you could pick them up and throw them or something if you wanted to. Yeah, climbing, swimming, a lot of these sort of in between things. Like, sometimes I'll talk about scrambling, which is sort of, if you don't quite feel confident walking on something, you sort of find yourself in this kind of crawling position as you're going up and down, and you're kind of stretching and reaching and testing things out. Um, and somebody might ask, well, what muscles are you using? But I would say that's not really important. The thing is that you're building confidence in moving across different terrains. So anyone who's done our course before has seen this. It's one of these questions that people ask all the time. How can we use the body? So if you get away from this idea before of thinking your body as isolated body parts, we can actually get into, well, what is it that we can do? So this is Georges Hebert, who in the 1980s is wearing a nice little loincloth there. He talks about things like walking, running, quadrupedal movement, which is crawling, climbing, jumping, balancing, lifting, carrying, throwing, and he talk about things like wrestling and swimming as well. Um, the Dutch, the athletic skills model, this is what they use for child physical development in the Netherlands. And instead of saying, well, you need to push, you need to pull, whatever, they say, well, it's good to do some balancing, falling, maybe some playing, maybe some play fighting, walking, running, jumping, landing, throwing, catching, kicking, shooting, aiming, climbing and scrambling, swaying and swinging. And, you can bring a little bit of music into that as well if you want. And I think this is a nice way of looking at things, is actually thinking about, well, how can we engage with the environment? So it's a question I asked before. How does a built or natural environment change people's behavior? I want to think about some barriers or enablers. So we already talked about a few of those, but you know, very subtle things can make a big difference. So I pulled this graphic from a Guardian article from this year, which you can see it's called Not Safe to Run in the Dark, How Inadequate Lighting in Public Spaces is Creating Barriers for Women. And it's one of these things that I think people don't always consider is that, there are sometimes safety issues, and we already talked about, kind of emotional and social issues as well. But the built environment is going to open up opportunities for people or close off opportunities based on things like lighting, based on things like population it's available to. And this is an example of a word I use all the time. I didn't come up with it. It's been around for a long time, but this idea of affordances. And I don't want to spend too much time on it, but I do just want to talk about how the environment can elicit behavior from people. So the classic picture is if you look at the door above and you see that big handle and you want to walk into a Starbucks, what are you going to do? You're going to pull on the handle, aren't you? Even though the sign says push, you're going to pull because that's what the environment invites you to do. Same thing with the one you see that nice handle you want to grab on, so you're more likely to push it than you are to pull it. So in the environment, we have all these invitations of the built environment where we can use it in different ways, whether it's an escalator telling us not to go upstairs, or if we're walking through the woods and we see an interesting path, if we feel capable and brave and strong, we might want to go ahead and engage with that. So a big thing that we're trying to build up in our populations, in both our coaches and just the people we're working with, is just this idea of perception of affordances, um, which is the more time you spend out in nature, moving in nature, the more opportunities you see to engage with it. Because what we're trying to do is we're trying to increase people's sense of confidence, increase people's sense that they're allowed to participate in nature. And it's not just a conscious thing, it's an unconscious thing as well. As you build up your confidence and your capabilities, you're going to engage with nature differently. Um, so a fancy word for this is just action capacity. So it's essentially what people are capable of doing. And the more you build up your action capacities, the more you're going to see opportunities for moving in nature. I was going to say, I've got all the slides saved, so I'll go ahead and give the slides to everybody at the end, so don't feel like you have to take notes. Um, so I want to talk about these idea of perceived affordances. And if we see here, we can see that these are different affordances that you might find in your everyday life. So actually, there's one that's pertinent to me right now. I managed to injure myself the other day. So if you look at the top one, there's someone, maybe like a father figure, who's crawling with a baby. And it's funny, it's right now, it's really hard for me to get up and down this week. And I've just realized that so much of the house, the way we have the house set up, is based on the assumption that you can get up and down to grab a pan. So we have we have a compost bin that's really low to the ground, and instead of me putting things in the compost bin, I've just been putting them in a bowl and leaving them for Jill to put in the compost bin, because I just can't bend over this week because my injury. But there's lots of different affordances. So if we look at the people who are outside playing frisbee, if you feel healthy and confident, you see people playing a game of frisbee, you'll think you can join in on it. But if you don't feel confident, if you don't feel like you've got that capability, you're not even going to try to engage with it. Or if we look at the bottom right, there's some stepping stones, and we see them every year when we take the family to Yorkshire to there's an abbey up in the Dales, and they have this beautiful walk. But along the walk, there's some stepping stones that go through the river, and you'll see people walk up and they get to these stepping stones, and the walk just ends for them and they have to turn around. So it means they don't get to engage with the environment. You might see a tree, you might see it as an opportunity for climbing or swinging or other things. On the other end, if you're someone who's not confident in your ability to squat down low, you might be traveling in Southeast Asia or Southern Europe, and you see a squat toilet and you feel like it's not available to you. So suddenly you feel like you cannot even engage with the environment and go to the bathroom. Or you're walking, now I'm looking in the bottom left. If you're walking a country road and you come up to a gate or a fence and it's closed, that might be the end of the walk for you. But if you have the confidence to jump up and over it, then all of a sudden you can continue your adventure. And then finally, in the top left, um, you see this as well. Sometimes people will be going on walks and they'll see a flight of stairs and they just won't be able to engage with it. And this could be for a lot of reasons. It could be conditioning, but a lot of times, men, especially as they get older, they develop hip problems that might prevent them from going upstairs. So that's one of the things that I want you to start thinking about. So what I would like for you to do I'll do this in a second. So what I want to think about is when you're planning your adventure run, I want you to get away from the idea of these sort of arbitrary gym movements, not because they're bad, but just because you've got so many other opportunities to move out in nature. So one of the things we really talk about is this idea of task-based training. And it's really simple. And instead of having all these different models for different kinds of movements and different kinds of muscles, we just think, well, like, what are movements that are important to people? So with this task-based training, especially if I'm working with older adults, I don't think about sets and reps. I don't think about teaching them squats or hinges or deadlifts or anything like that. I think about, you know, can you get there and back? Can you get from A to B? Can you get over there and can you come back? Can you get down to the ground and back up again? Okay, if you see an obstacle, can you get over it? Can you get under it? Can you go around it? Sometimes I might do a task where I'm going to have people try to pick something up, move it around, put it in a different situation, pick up something down low and put it up high, pick up something high and put it down low, little things like that. So obviously you could do that with rocks or logs or whatever. And then once you have those basic tasks in mind, you can think of, well, how can I start layering in challenges? So you can add in things like resistance, you can make it heavier. You can start challenging people's confidence. If we're talking about running or jumping and landing, you could have them try to go a little bit higher, a little bit lower, a little bit longer. Think about environmental context. What I mean is some things that feel easy in the gym or on flat ground will suddenly be much more challenging. Just walking over rocks or cobbles, it's amazing. If you're working with a group of people who've never been outside the city, and all of a sudden they're on uneven ground, it's almost like watching somebody be on a ship for the first time. They're learning how to wobble. So there's loads of benefit there. Complexity and variability. What I mean there is, there's different ways that you can get over a log. You can have people very slowly kind of crawl over a log. You can have them try to vault over a log. And these are things that'll come out as people gain confidence. You can add speed or urgency. So depending on your population, you can add an element of competition if you want. You can have people run in pairs. You can have people try to run for time. That's really only if it's important to your group. You can also just set a fun goal. You could say, well, all right, we're going on a walk. Lunch is at 12 o'clock. So, let's see if we can get back in time for lunch. And obviously, you still feed everybody, but you can put it in a context that could be interesting, a challenge that meets people where they are. Um, so this is going to be very small to see, but this is the skills map that we use. Don't worry, I don't expect you to read it. We'll have a link. I think Jill will put a link in the
I've just
oh,
put a download in the chat.
okay, perfect. So there's a download in the chat, and this is just different ways that we think about building up the skills of our population over time. So these are things that we've tried to kind of systematize, so to give people clear ideas on progressions and how they can work with people. But just for purposes here, you really just want to think about the above challenges. What I was saying is this idea of getting down, getting up, getting over, things like that. So what I would like for everyone to do is just take a little break now. So we're going to take a little break. Maybe I'll put a 5-minute timer on when it's time to go. And I'll say, I want you to take 5 minutes, and I want you to get away from the computer. Don't worry about the computer. Okay, I'll be fine here. Take about 5 minutes to walk around your house, your garden, your street. You can also lie and go have a coffee and think about it. But I want you to think about, how does the environment invite you to use it? Are there any obvious invitations or disinvitations? So maybe there's no ball playing sign, or maybe there's a no bicycle sign, or maybe it's a busy road and you realize you can't walk on it if you want to. But maybe there are some interesting things. Maybe you found a stack of, the bike lock areas that you could climb over or under. Maybe there's some interesting loose stones. Maybe you can balance on a curb. So I want you to think about some opportunities for movement with an eye on, how can I turn this into an interesting movement challenge. You can take photos if that helps. Obviously, you don't have to. When we return, we can talk about what sort of invitations or disinvitations we noticed. So what sort of affordances were there? What opportunities did you see to engage in some of the movements we've talked about? And were there any individual constraints or limitations prevented you from engaging in things the way you wanted? So obviously with 5 minutes, you're not going to have that much of an opportunity, but it's interesting to think about what's possible, what's not possible. So yeah, I'd like to give everyone 5 minutes and really just go walk around, look around your house. If you can get outside, poke your head out the window, walk outside, and just think about, what can I do with the environment here? Are there any trees? Are there any opportunities to do anything interesting I wouldn't normally do? So I'm gonna send you off right now. It is, let's see, It's 1:07 on my clock. So if we could just come back at around 1:12, just 5 minutes, and I'll see you in a second. I want to see what everybody saw. Okay. So I don't want to see you on the camera. You can hide the camera if you want to lie. That's fine. I won't hold it against you. All right. See you in a few minutes.
Oh, hi. If you weren't on the live recording, please do take 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes to head outside and look around your street, your park, your garden, and see what the movement opportunities are or what the negative affordances are. Make a note of them. Of course, take a screenshot of the previous slide just to get you thinking as you go. But play around and see what you think. And when we come back, we had a nice discussion about it. So just get your head in the game and have a little think. And we will be back shortly.
Okay. I think we've got almost everybody back. Let's see. I see Andy coming back. Okay. Hello. All right. So feel free to go off mute if you want to. So we looked around, and I want to know what you found out. So I want to know what opportunities were there to engage with your environment besides just walking. Though walking is great. Were there any movement challenges you perceived? How could you scale these up or down? Don't worry, you don't need to think about that too much. Or when you're walking around, did you have any ideas how you can modify the environment? And I'm not talking about anything big, but you know, for example, tying a rope to a tree or moving a log, over a hole or something like that for some challenges. So, what did people see? Anything that jumped out at them?
I had an urge to climb on the wall, Andrew. So
That's
we've got a
good.
brick wall outside and it's quite high. Well,
Yeah,
I didn't go very high, so I
yeah.
just kind of crawled along it.
That's great. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm thinking about. And often we climb, it's not just about going high. It's very interesting to see if you can sort of traverse along like you're bouldering. Yeah, brick walls are absolutely great. And obviously they come in all different kinds of heights. So some are climbable, some are sort of jumpable, and some are just good for kind of looking at and thinking about. What else do we
Yeah.
see?
There's stream in my village,
Ooh,
and
yeah.
it's reminded me of a holiday I went on years ago. It was a bit of an activity holiday, and this random French guy took us for a walk up through a river,
Oh
looking
yeah.
at nature from that perspective. And there's sort of like a little bridge over the stream, so it'd be good to sort of get people climbing down into the stream, maybe off the bridge and back up again, and going for a little walk. It's not like a yeah,
Yes. I think
Like
I
a
think
tiny
too
gorge
exciting.
walk. I love that.
Yeah, like I was gonna say, that's what I was gonna say too with Gorge Walks. We were up in Aviemore up in Scotland this summer, and it's interesting because they have all these family adventure things that you can pay for. Pay £30 per person to do this and that. But the area is so beautiful, and because Jill's family's been going there for years, they know where there's this nice little mini gorge, and it's nice and deep, and you can sort of jump in, and there's a bridge, and you can climb. It's sort of where the locals go. And the children loved it. It was their absolute favorite day. There were all these sort of paid activities that we did here and there, but in terms of something that was going to make memories, I think doing those gorge walks or those canyoning, I think those are really, really nice. Obviously, you got to decide whether or not your group wants to get wet. That's a different level of commitment, but that's good. Anything else that anybody saw or anything interesting, or did it make you think of something?
It was nice. It made me feel really creative, like having to come up with things that you could do with stuff that you see all the time. Because I think I just did it by looking out the window, but I was like, oh, there's like a road sign you could definitely duck under.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
or there's a street lamp that you could swing around like you're in Singing in the Rain. That kind of stuff. Kind of really nice.
Yeah, it's really it's funny when you're with different groups because they see things differently. And when I used to go, I had friends when I was living abroad who were really into parkour, and I had some friends who were into gymnastics and CrossFit, and they would go out, and even though they were just going out drinking for the night, but it was funny after they had a few beers, they would just sort of run around the city and see what they could jump on and touch and grab and climb a hold of. And no one ever really got hurt, but it was always just on the edge of it. Yeah, I think the creativity is it's something to focus on. You really want to get outside this idea of what these things are designed for versus what you can just use them for, especially if you're in an urban area. Okay, good. So again, I want to go back to this idea of movement as a tool. So we briefly talked about affordances, and I didn't talk about capabilities in this talk, but we can save that for another day. So, essentially we're building capacities or skills, which is really what we want to try to do rather than just focusing on sets and reps. We want to give people more options to engage with the environment. They're tools that help you solve problems and accomplish goals, this idea of task-based. Um, so, in the real world, we want to provide people with opportunities to do that because that's what it's going to make people feel more empowered. That's what's going to make people feel like they're a part of their environment. So there's lots of models based on this, and I think we could save this for another talk because I want to open it up in a second. But I do want to talk about this idea of contracting and expanding. Let me see if I can close that. Oh, nope. Screen share. I just lost my screen share. Hang on. Oh, there we are. Okay, perfect. I want to talk about this idea of contracting and expanding cycles. And essentially, there's loads of models. So I'm looking at Vygotsky's zone of proximal development right now. And if you look at the innermost circles, this is essentially what people are capable of doing right now. This is firmly within their comfort zone. And everyone's going to have a different inner circle. Some people are naturally going to have opportunities to be adventurous and physically active. But for some people, just going outside might be outside of their comfort zone. So you want to think about that. And our goal is to get that green circle of comfort and expand it outwards. So other people might be familiar with Seneger's learning zone model, which is based on Vygotsky's. And you don't need to memorize any of this, but you've got the comfort zone, the learning zone, and the panic zone. And that's exactly right. You want to try to pull people out of that comfort zone and get them to spend some time where maybe they feel a little bit uncomfortable, but there's an opportunity for them to grow. And then I want to briefly talk about these ideas of avoidance cycles when we talk about cycles. So this is we can talk about this in another chat, but we want to try to create these sort of positive feedback loops. And there's lots of negative feedback loops in people's life. So famously, there's the fear of falling cycle, where once an old person falls because of fear of injury, they can stop engaging with the world around them, which is going to mean they start to contract and they spend less time doing physical activities. So the next time they fall, it could be even worse. But these can be emotional, they could be social. So same thing. Sometimes if people hurt themselves once, they can develop this fear of doing a movement and they'll start avoiding engaging in movement. So this is a fear avoidance cycle. But the same thing can be true emotionally as well. If people have had bad experiences with something, say, oh, I'm not physical or I don't like being outside, then they won't spend as much time outside. So when they are outside, they're going to feel really uncomfortable. And we really want to reverse that and flip it upside down to give people these little experiences so we can change their narratives about them. So these cycles go both ways. We can reverse these vicious cycles and create virtuous cycles of growth and adaptation. But it's all about meeting people where they are and not pushing them too far out of their comfort zone too quickly, but also not letting them get bored with things either. So how can people get started? So don't overthink this. As with all matters like this, just find a friend and go on a walk at first. If that's where you're at right now and you're thinking about doing this, just find a friend, go on a walk and just look at things, point out and say, oh, hey, I wonder if we could climb over that. I wonder if we could get under that. I wonder if we could scramble around that. What would that feel like? And then you can try different ways. Later, you can think about adding speed. But for right now, just go on a walk. Then maybe find some more friends and say, hey, we found this nice walk and we've tried these challenges. How would you solve this problem? And then just go outside and do it and just see what comes out of it. In terms of format, and we can talk about this more in another context. I can also share a sheet on planning, but just figure out the area you want to go to. So just define an area, find your place. It's great if it's a place that you can go to regularly so you can see it change and throughout the seasons and you can experience it on rainy days and sunny days. I think that's really meaningful. Just walk around and identify these affordances. Think about how you can support your community members. So think about what the barriers might be, whether it's emotional, social, or even just logistical. How can you make it easy for them to engage and make them feel welcome, make them feel like it's something that they can be a part of? And then one of the things we'll often do is we'll run 2 loops. So first thing we'll do, if we get a group together, we'll sort of pick a distance that it's feasible to do twice in an hour. And the first time you can just kind of walk through and chat and give people opportunity to play with it at their own pace. And the second time, what you can do is you can release people in groups of 2s or 3s and give them a little bit of autonomy so they can actually go back to all the different challenges, all the different affordances that we identified, and they can start to play around with them. And usually what we'll do is, without putting pressure on people, I'll just have people line up in a line and say, look, if you're feeling really adventurous and if you're feeling a little bit competitive or really energetic today, I want you to stand more over here. However, if you're not too fussed about going quickly, if you're not worried about being in a hurry, if you just want to have a nice chat, you can stand over on this side. And people are generally pretty good at gravitating where they want to stand. And this is nice because it's not about who's the fastest, it's not about who's the best. It's about, well, what do you want to get out of today? If you want to kind of have a nice chat and move a little bit, you can go over here. If you want to move quickly, move over here. Set people in groups. You can also think about what groups would be complementary. So if you have somebody who you know maybe has confidence issues, put them with one or two people in the group who are going to be really good at building up their confidence and making them feel welcome. If you have someone who tends to be just really, really competitive and has no time for chat, then you can put them with someone else who's really competitive and has no time for chat. If you have someone who's nursing a bit of an injury, you could think about what's a complementary way that you can either pair them with someone who can build their confidence or pair them with someone else who also isn't too worried about moving quickly. All right, I've been talking a lot. Let me go ahead and stop my share. Let's see. How do I do that?
You've stopped the share. That's good.
Oh,
We
have I?
can't see it. Yeah.
Well done, me, but I can't see anybody else. There we go. Okay. So that's pretty much what I want to talk about. I want to leave about 5, 6, 10 minutes at the end. So it looks like I've succeeded in that. And I just wanted to talk about some specifics. If people have any questions, if you want to, I don't know, really ask us any questions and we can provide materials or ideas. So I'm just going to open it up to the group. Also, if you're feeling shy, you can chat as well. That's fine. Ooh, I like the idea of stream scramble. We what did we do in our last course? We came up with UFIT and sheep shape because there are lots of sheep around. That was the affordance we found. So we are trying to figure out how can we use sheep um, for this. So I'm just going to draw everyone's attention that we did share 2 PDFs. Jill shared the capability skills map, and I've gone ahead and shared a PDF of the slides that I talked about today as well, in case you want to reference any of those. So does anyone have any questions or, anyone who's, is that a raised hand? Oh, no. Okay. Emma.
So I'd be slightly nervous about someone getting hurt. So if there's a lovely woods about a mile from mine, but it's outside of the village. So to get there's some quite narrow lanes, slightly dangerous. And then obviously there's hazards in the woods as well, which even if you go there quite regularly, which I do, you can't go there just before every event when trying to put on to see what extra risks there might be. Have you had people pick up injuries on any adventure walks or runs, and how do you sort of set expectations around that? And
no, that's a good question. I'll let Jill jump in too. So obviously, you always want to do your risk assessment, and you've done a very good job of anticipating problems. We've been quite lucky. The only person who's gotten injured in our adventure run, I'm laughing because he's one of our assistant coaches. He's a GP. And if you've ever worked with GPs, they're notoriously accident prone because they tend to be quite competitive. And it wasn't even that he injured himself on the adventure run. It's that he'd already injured himself and he was being really stubborn. And he decided he wanted to go out anyway. So I think he'd already rolled his ankle earlier in the week, and then he was doing some jumping and he aggravated his ankle some more. And that's the worst it's ever been. And for that one, I don't feel too bad because he's one of my good friends, and I very strongly said I don't think you should do this. But because the way we have our insurance set up and our liability, I was fine with that. And he's someone who's a close personal friend and also an assistant coach. So he's very mindful of those things. But yeah, you do want to think about the risk and you want to be very honest about the risk, and you don't need to magnify the risk anymore by adding additional challenges. If it sounds like you've identified a place where just being there is really challenging, then that's great. You don't even need to create anything artificial. You can just literally lead people through there and give them opportunities. I think a lot of it is also setting the mood and the vibe of what level of competition and what level of cooperation is appropriate. I think for most groups, if they don't already think of themselves as fit people and active people, then I think most people will naturally kind of have a sense of cooperation when they're doing this. And there's always going to be an element of risk. And one of the biggest benefits of putting oneself in risky situations is that's how people learn to calibrate their sense of risk. So, you know,
Just,
oh, sorry,
can
go
I
ahead.
just jump in, Andrew?
Yeah, please do.
The briefing that we give people at the beginning of the adventure grounds, regardless of the population that we're working with, is to make sensible decisions.
Hmm.
And we used to say, don't take risks. Now we say, make sensible decisions and do push yourself a little bit, but don't overdo it. And I think that if, in terms of injury, the people that are most likely to get injured are the people at the top end,
Yes,
because they are fit and competent and
very good
probably
point there.
quite competitive. The people who are not that competitive will go at their own pace and see it as an opportunity to have a chat and just have a nice time. And so if we were doing it with the older populations in their 70s and 80s, it will look very, very different. It'll be a walk, and then here are a series of obstacles, and we're just going to kind of play around in it. And they'll just do that once, and they'll do it in their partners, and it'll be very chatty. It's like a walk with some obstacles. If it's with our kind of strength and conditioning group, and most of those people will be in their 30s, 40s, and 50s, and at the top end, they will be quite fit and strong. When we do that line up at the beginning of stand over here if you're wanting to go fast, it's those people that are most likely to injure themselves. And I'd say that our assistant coach was in that.
Yes.
Yeah, and it'll generally be if you put two men together, they just cannot resist
Yeah, there's
the.
nothing more dangerous than a 40-year-old man trying to prove himself.
I guess the good thing about that is, though, those people are probably used to getting injured
Yes,
anyway,
yeah.
so it's not a big deal. It's the people who are lacking in confidence, who haven't really been injured through exercise before, who you don't want to put them off forevermore.
Yeah.
But their goal for the adventure one is whatever it is. But normally, if it's for that population who are cautious, who are just starting out, our goal for that kind of adventure run is just have a nice time. Like that's all we want you to do is
Yeah,
just have a nice time.
that's a very big
And if we
point.
can leave you with some tools to like think about more movement in your day, then great. But we're not going to be prescriptive about the movement that you do. We're not going to say you've got to get over this log. You could walk around that log. If you don't feel safe doing it, don't do it. And so it's a very different briefing set. Whereas with the top lot, it'll be like, yeah, if you manage to vault it the first time, let's see if you can vault it faster and maybe fall out of it. Those guys are off
Yeah.
doing their thing.
And one of the things I want to point out is the injuries that we have had. I mean, really that one, that came from running. It wasn't anything exotic. It wasn't people who've tried to jump between two buildings and missed it. It's just normally what comes up as you'd see in trail running or any kind of cross country, which is just repetitive injuries and things like that sort of come part and parcel with running, as opposed to something that acutely happened. It wasn't like someone was carrying a log over their head and they dropped it on themselves or something.
Did anyone have any other questions before we kind of close? So just to say thanks very much for coming.
Yeah, thank you.
In the chat, you've got two downloads. So you've got the one that Andrew shared of the slides and our skills map. Please do share how you get on. So if you head out over the next month, we'll have a bit of time on the next call to kind of check in, see how everyone got on, what you found. You can share that either if you're on our coaching platform or already, then share it there. But if not, you could share it in Instagram stories. That would be really nice to see. And yeah, just I think the main message is go out and have a go and see how you get on. And if it feels more comfortable for you to start with a friend and sort of play around, then do that first and just kind of see how you go from there.
Yeah, I would say that the biggest barrier to starting something is feeling like it has to be something big. literally just taking a friend on a walk or a family member on a walk can be all you need. Oh, thank you for the message. All right. Thank you very much, everybody. Really appreciate your time. If you have any questions, like Jill said, send us an email. Any questions about anything we talked about, same thing, just let us know. We're happy to share resources or ideas.
Cool. All right. We'll see you later, guys.
Oh,
Thanks very much.
oh, bye-bye.
Bye.